Cinder de la Dune summons the Shadow Fiends. Chapter 2. The interior of the mausoleum was dank and cool. Dead leaves clustered in the far corners of the room, and Cinder's boots scuffed over the concrete floor as she made her way toward the marble bench in the center. She tried not to think of the corpses lying within the walls, of her ancestors' suits and dresses moldering through the decades of their dark and silent sleep. Instead, she busied her mind with Wilhelmina's instructions, going over the steps again and again, despite how simple they actually were. The witch's spirit had informed Cinder that for magic to work, the practitioner's belief in the spell had to be absolute. It wasn't enough to mix herbs in the proper proportion or utter a chant with flawless inflection. A rite was truly powered by the conjurer exerting his or her will, by unfaltering conviction that the desired outcome would be obtained. The human mind was plagued by doubt and uncertainty. It had been conditioned over the centuries to believe it was weak and flawed, that any intervention in daily affairs had to be petitioned from a superior being. It was taught to supplicate itself before the fates, to remain subservient and powerless. If a miracle occurred, it was only due to the intervention of a benevolent God. Surely not because the prayers had been infused with the very energies which had set the changes in motion. Thoughts like that were heresy. They would condemn a soul to a searing lake of fire for all eternity and strip away any hopes of a heavenly reward. That, Wilhelmina spelled out, was how mankind had been trained to believe that they were as powerless as a leaf on the wind. To shatter these ingrained deceptions, the mind required irrefutable proof. And what better way than to give it a glimpse into a much larger world? Cinder knelt before the bench as if it were an altar, and opened her lunchbox once again. The last component gathered was the first to be utilized. The girl opened the velvet pouch and carefully poured the graveyard dirt onto the platitude inscribed in the marble, forming a large mound. Next was a black candle which had been anointed with heartfelt tears. She planted it in the very center of the mound as carefully as a technician defusing a bomb, ensuring it was sturdy enough not to topple if accidentally jarred. By the darkness of night, I call to you. Cinder's whisper was small and soft, the words wavering with a tremor she couldn't quite shake. By the darkness of night, you submit to my bidding. Removing a makeup mirror from the lunchbox, the girl propped it behind the candle, ensuring the wick was perfectly centered in the reflective surface. By silvered glass shall the door be opened, by silvered glass and chime of one. The ding of a small bell rang throughout the crypt. Despite the chill in the air, beads of sweat dotted Cinder's brow, and she bit her bottom lip as she removed a sewing needle with pinched fingers. A drop of life to pay the toll. The girl winced and sucked air through her teeth as she jabbed the tip into her thumb. A globule of blood welled from the pinprick, a perfect hemisphere of glistening crimson, which dripped onto the pile of dirt as she squeezed the wound. The chill of the mausoleum seemed to have seeped through Cinder's clothes and skin. It suffused through layers of fat and muscle, burrowing into the pores in her bones and crystallizing the marrow within. No amount of warmth could have chased away its icy touch, and the girl's entire body was racked with shivers. She half expected plumes of vapor to be released with each breath, but this was a cold which had nothing to do with ambient temperature. Cinder knew it wasn't too late. She could still call the whole thing off. Though it felt like half a world away, she could be home within 15 minutes. Safe and snug in bed with her father's snores muffled by the walls, reassuring in their nightly consistency. Should never chat with the dead witch again. and this whole ordeal would become nothing more than a spooky story. And yet, she watched her own hand dip into the lunchbox a final time. She felt the scratchy texture of the matchbox's side, but the sensation was muted, almost as though it really wasn't her fingers plucking it from the tin box, as if she were no more than an observer in her own skin, powerless to stop the events which had been set into motion. Wilhelmina had said this was the final step. When the wick sputtered and burned and candlelight bounced off the mirror's surface, a window would be opened. A window which would allow the little girl to gaze into the spirit world, proving to her obstinate mind that there really was a different realm, one which existed outside the narrow scope of science and logic, one which would empower her in ways she could have never dreamed. Why then was she trying so hard to keep her own fingers from sliding one of the matches out of the box? Why did she feel as though she could breathe a little easier when the blue tip snapped off as it was raked across the striking surface? There were 2 matches left in the box, and part of her watched in horror as another was removed. Her fingers flicked the rectangular stick along the matchbox's side, and the tip flared to life amid a cloud of sulfuric-smelling smoke. Light and shadow danced through the mausoleum as Cinder's trembling hand reached toward the candle, and the girl realized she was holding her breath. "Don't do that. Blow it out. Blow it out now. Please, just blow it out." But she didn't have to. The girl's hand was shaking so badly that the fire winked out, allowing the darkness to rush back in. "Okay, we can go home now. Just go home, okay? You don't have to do this." It seemed darker in the crypt than it had been previously. Cinder knew this was because the few seconds of illumination had been enough to burn away her eyes' adaptation to the gloom. Yet it felt like something more, as if some hideous creature loomed in one corner, gorging itself on light and warmth and safety, as tentacles rustled the dead leaves, their tips rising like snakes as they zeroed in on her racing heart. "You don't have to tell anything on the blog. Make it up. Just go. Please, please go." Yet Cinder's body betrayed her again. Her fingertips found the final match by touch alone. The edge of her thumb guided it through the darkness. Perhaps it would break again, or maybe it would simply sputter out. But no. The light inched toward the candle, even as Cinder's body instinctively pulled away. Her own voice, thin and weak, speaking words her conscience told her she shouldn't. "By light and flame, I open the way." The match transferred the fire to the wick, and a soft yellow glow surrounded the candle, its aura reflected in the mirror like a nebulous halo. At that very moment, wind howled through the trees, and a clap of thunder boomed with enough force to rain dust down from the crypt's ceiling. Hound dogs brayed, howled, and barked in the distance, and Cinder scrambled backward, her heart feeling as if it had leapt into her throat. Without thought, she scrabbled to her feet and darted toward the door, not daring to look back. She didn't want to see the mirror's reflection. She didn't want her soul to be tainted with the evil that roiled there, the darkness which she sensed gathering within the confines of the tomb. Darting out of the mausoleum with a squill, the little girl ran. She zigzagged through tombstones and statues, bounded over low-lying hedges, and careened around crypts. Decorative pine trees whipped in the wind as flashes of lightning bathed the landscape in electric blue. She ran until stitches of pain pierced her sides, and her lungs felt as if they were on fire, for she knew she could not stop. She felt as though something was just behind her, something dark and fast, viciously ruthless, and wanting nothing more than to drag her back into the darkness where yellow teeth would gnash and bite and rip. To stop running would be to die. Of this, Cinder was certain. As she burst through the arched gateway of the cemetery, she passed through an oasis of light cast from an overhead lamp. For a fleeting second, she felt safe, like nothing bad could ever touch her. But then that little sanctuary of light was gone, and her attention was riveted on the next street lamp, the next floodlight mounted on the side of a darkened building. Moving through the night like a skipping stone through pools of light and shadow, Cinder ran until her thighs felt as though the ligaments were being stretched on a rack, until she was half dizzy with fear and hyperventilation in her stumbling feet and threatened to offer her up to the evil at her back. Vaulting over a fence, the hem of her mourning dress snagged on a picket and ripped away a jagged strip of fabric. Or had it actually been a razor-sharp talon, so close that it had nearly skewered the back of her leg? At some point, fear must have short-circuited her brain, for the next thing Cinder knew, she was squirming between the sill and her partially open window. She fell into the plush carpet of her bedroom floor, spun around, and closed the window as quickly, yet still as quietly, as she could. Leaping into bed, she kicked the sheets and pillows to the side and pulled her duvet up to the tip of her nose as she watched the shadows of trees dance on her walls. Too scared for crying and struggling to catch her breath, Cinder trembled. She squeezed her eyes tightly shut and prayed for sleep to deliver her from this nightmare world. Yet that was a comfort she would not be allowed, for her young mind told her that she'd left a portal open, that she'd left a candle burning in front of the mirror with its wax dripping onto the graveyard dirt below. She'd opened a door and ran without closing it, allowing untold horrors free passage into this world. And as much as she wished otherwise, Cinder de la Doom knew this night was far from over. So, has little Cinder bitten off more than she can chew? Did she really conjure up some dark malevolent entity? Or has this all just been a product of her overactive imagination? Did she just allow herself to get all worked up and scared, and perhaps maybe learn a valuable lesson from this experience? Well, these questions will be answered tomorrow night in Chapter 3 of Cinder de la Doom Summons the Shadow People. Technically, they're fiends. But, good night.